Terrific. Everybody, welcome indeed to our second agency presentation. We are very honored to introduce you to Kelly McDonald, and she is the Program Specialist Division of Bioenergy with the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, NIFA, with the United States Department of Agriculture, which is part of the USDA's Research, Education, and Economics mission area. And the USDA is of great interest to many of us here at the University of California because, Kelly, you folks have funded us quite a bit, and also various and increasingly growing ventures in the ag tech area and so forth. So we love having you with us and delighted. Everyone, Kelly McDonald is Program Specialist, as I had indicated, and she's here to chat with us about the NIFA program, its funding interest, and be ready to throw out as many questions as you possibly have relative to your interests and how you may be able to enhance your chances to be an awardee. So, Kelly, thank you for joining us and welcome, and we'll hand the baton over to you.
Sure, so let me make sure I can share my screen here. Let's see. There we go. You able to see that, hopefully? All right, well.
Looks good, Kelly.
Okay, awesome, thanks for confirming. Hello, everyone. As Marty mentioned, my name is Kelly McDonald, and I'm a program specialist with the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. We administer the SBIR program on behalf of USDA. I've been with NIFA for about 3 years now, and I've been fortunate enough to work with the SBIR program during much of that time. So I'm happy to be here today and hopefully share some information that you may not already know about our program. So just a general overview looking at the SBIR program as a whole. As many of you probably already know a lot of this, that the program is designed to help meet federal research and development or R&D needs by stimulating technological innovation, and then of course increasing private sector commercialization of those innovations. We also look at the component of fostering and encouraging participation by women and socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. Focusing more now on the USDA SBIR program and some of our goals and features, our proposals are really investigator-initiated ideas, meaning we do not have a particular government procurement focus as other programs may do. The ideas are truly coming from investigators to meet our overall research priorities. The awards are based on scientific and technical merit, qualifications, and of course the commercial potential of the innovation. We do highly encourage subcontracting to universities and labs, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in detail in a few minutes. And then considering some of the success metrics from companies that have received SBIR grants, particularly from the USDA program, we're looking at increases in the number of new jobs created, as well as in sales of the technology or services, as well as sales other businesses of the licenses that for the technology developed. A general overview of our program, our annual budget is roughly $25 million. Our funding opportunities are for SBIR grants only. So we do not offer contracts and we do not offer a STTR program. Our phase 1 awards are for $100,000 in a duration of 8 months. And for phase 2, they are 2-year awards for $600,000. And those are not included in TABA, which I'll talk about also in a minute. Please note that these are the award lengths that come as standard, but we do also offer what are known as no-cost extensions. And basically this allows you to request up to an additional 12 months to continue your work with no additional funding. And this could be really useful, particularly in that transition from phase 1 to phase 2. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. But a lot of our awardees do choose to do that, take that no cost extension. When looking at our funding rates for phase 1 and phase 2, I put the numbers here for fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20. For fiscal year 19, we made 79 phase 1 awards out of 533 applications. And for fiscal year 20, we made 70 awards out of 435 applications. So our funding rate for phase 1 is generally about 15%. For fiscal year 20, we also had additional awards for our COVID-19 rapid response solicitation. And that was a bit unique because that was a second solicitation for phase 1. Generally, USDA only has one phase 1 solicitation per year. So this last year was a bit of an anomaly. For phase 2, in fiscal year 19, we made 26 awards out of 64 applications. And in fiscal year 20, we made 29 awards out of 68 applications. So for phase 2, our funding rate is typically 40 to 50%. And then we also offer technical and business assistance, and I'll talk about that more here. So technical and business assistance, also known as TABA, is what you'll often hear it referred to, was part of legislation in 2019 that allows companies to elect additional funding for technical and business assistance services. And these can include things such as IP costs, marketing, market research, or consults on funding strategy, along with many other activities. Ultimately, you cannot use TABA for anything that would normally fall under your R&D budget. So that's the big difference there. For phase 1, you can select up to $6,500 of additional funding on top of that $100,000. And mainly the phase 1 TABA is really geared toward developing that commercialization plan, which you heard the DOT person speak about is for your phase 2 a requirement. For phase 2, you can elect up to $50,000 additional funding, and that's really focused towards moving the innovation into a commercial market. So although you think about it as kind of that phase 3 where there's no additional federal funding, but how do you get to that stage of commercialization? One thing I want to note here is that for phase 1, you have 2 options. You can use USDA's vendor, which is going to be Larda Institute, or you can elect to use your own vendor that you select. If you want to use USDA's vendor, you do not need to include these funds in your budget. So for your budget, you would request up to $100,000, and that's because USDA is going to pay Larda directly those $6,500. If you want to use your own vendor, however, you have to put that in your budget cost. So your budget would read up to $106,500, and you would also have to put the justification and a statement of commitment, which is described in the RFA, from your vendor. For phase 2, you're always going to request those funds in your budget, and that's because we do not have a phase 2 vendor. For phase 2, because you're a lot more focused, it's hard to have one vendor that can meet all of your needs. So you're going to select your own vendor for phase 2 and put that funding into your budget. So your budget may be up to $650,000. In terms of the topic areas for which we solicit applications, the RFA outlines the 10 topic areas that we offer, and we solicit applications under each of these 10 topic areas. Depending on which topic area you apply, that's going to be the topic area where you're competing. So for 8.1, all of those proposals are pretty much competing amongst itself. They're going to panel together, where the 8.7s are going to panel amongst themselves. What you're looking at here is your program code and your program code name, which you're going to need for your application. So when I ask you for your program code, it's going to be the number 8.1, 8.2, 8.3. The program code name is that corresponding text. So for 8.1, your program code is 8.1. Your program code name is Forest and Related Resources. So just keep that in mind as you're filling out your application. As I mentioned, you're going to have to select which topic area you want to apply to. You can only apply to one. And these are generally broad topic areas, and that's done intentionally. So in many cases, your project may fall under one or more topic areas, and it's really up to you to talk to the topic area leaders and decide where it should best fall and where it would be a best fit. And also looking at the RFA and seeing what the research priorities are for each of these and where your project is most responsive. I highlighted in here 2 of the topic areas, 8.6 and 8.12 in red. And that's because these are a little bit different in that they allow off-the-shelf technologies. So for 8.6 and 8.12, you can use a technology that may already exist, but now you're using it in a new and innovative way. So that's unique to those 2 topic areas. The RFA lists the program contacts for each of these, so we highly suggest you reach out to those topic area leaders and set up a consult before you start preparing your application. And just some general technology areas supported by the USDA SBIR program. Again, you can see it's very broad. You have robotics, biofuels, remote sensing, nanotechnology. So a very broad range of technologies that are cross-cutting across those 10 topic areas. In terms of the fiscal year 2021 timeline, these are all estimated times that are subject to change, but in general, the phase 1 RFA is released in July of every year. This year we were a little late. It was released in August, so we appreciate your patience for those that were looking for it. The proposal deadline this year is October 22nd at 5 p.m. Eastern. The panels will be held between December and January this year, with notifications going out hopefully no later than March, and then awards being made next summer. For phase 2, note that it is only open to the phase 1 awardees. There's no straight to phase 2 program. That RFA is released in December. The proposal deadlines are generally in May, or the proposal deadline, that should be singular, in May. Panels will be held next summer with notifications going out by August and the awards by November. So when you look at the SBIR review process, we have the proposals being evaluated by a confidential peer review panel. And these are experts from academia, industry, federal labs that are recruited by a panel manager. The panel manager becomes a temporary employee of USDA, and they work on the panel throughout the entire process. So they are the ones who are recruiting these panelists. For phase 1 and phase 2, we also use potentially ad hoc reviewers. So the panelists that they recruit generally have expertise for all the proposals that we receive that year. However, if there's a particular proposal that's kind of unique or has an individual component of it that we need an expert in that particular field, we will bring them on as an ad hoc reviewer. So in phase 1, there's at least 3 panelists per proposal. In phase 2, we have technical reviewers as well as commercial reviewers. So the technical reviewers are going to focus mainly on the science, where the commercial reviewers are going to mainly focus on that commercialization plan when they review. So you'll actually end up with 5 individual reviews plus any ad hocs. We work hard to make sure our panels are diverse and representative. So based on gender, geographical region, and where they're coming from, we do work hard to make sure those panels are well balanced. All applicants receive verbatim copies of the reviews. So that will be those 3 or those 5 individual reviews, as well as a panel summary when applicable. So in phase 1, we have a streamlining process. And basically how that works is that any proposal that receives very, very poor reviews from the first 3 reviewers will not get discussed in panel. And that's mainly to allow more time to be focused on the stronger written proposals that have a better chance of getting funded and figuring out where that funding line falls. In that case, they will just get the reviews, but they will not get a panel summary. For phase 2, we do not have any streamlining process. Every proposal gets reviewed. Every proposal will get those 5 reviews as well as the panel summary. For phase 1, if you are not selected for an award, you can always reapply either the next funding cycle or any time thereafter. You do get 1 additional page in the project narrative to respond to the reviewer's comments, and that is expected. For phase 2, though, you only get 1 shot. So you really want to be sure before you submit your phase 2 application that it is as strong as possible, because if you do not get selected, you're going to have to go back to phase 1 and come up with a new phase 1 proposal. As I mentioned earlier, you could take that no-cost extension as a phase 1 or a phase 2 awardee. And what many of our phase 1 awardees will do, probably about half, take that no-cost extension, make sure that their phase 1 work is really wrapped up, and make sure their phase 2 proposal is as strong as possible before applying. So they'll actually take a year off before applying to the phase 2. And ultimately, that's your decision as a grantee. I talked earlier about collaboration with university and government scientists and how this is strongly encouraged. Things to keep in mind is that for phase 1, outside services is limited to 1/3 of your budget. For phase 2, you're allowed 50% of your budget to be used for outside services. Scientists can serve as the principal investigator, but they have to reduce their employment at their home institution to 49%, and that's for the duration of the grant. Usually it's not acceptable for the scientist to serve as a consultant or have all the research done in their lab. And another option, of course, is the development of a cooperative research and development agreement, or a CRADA, is often done with the USDA lab. And for us, that's often done with ARS, the Agricultural Research Service. And we do have a point of contact there, and what she does is she will talk to you about what you're doing and see if there is an ARS scientist that's working on something similar and possibly pair you up with that person. So if that's something you're interested in, feel free to reach out to me and I can put you in contact with that person at ARS. So the CRADA is the Cooperative Research and Development Agreements. How does this fit into that review process? And basically the way this weighs into the review process is that if you have 2 proposals of roughly equal merit, where you can't really rank one higher than the other, but one of them does have a CRADA, often that kind of gets the leg up or the boost in the ratings, just because the CRADAs have been shown to have a very high success rate in bringing a product to market and with that commercialization success. So some other things to think of in terms of improving chances of award success. As I mentioned earlier, part of the review criteria, the high scientific and technical merit, as well as the commercial potential. So again, this is the reason it's a part of the review criteria, is because it is important to that commercial success. And when thinking about the awards that are made, we do try to balance high risk, high reward proposals, looking at cutting edge technologies that if they are successful, they can change the world, but it's that what if they are going to be successful versus this is definitely going to be successful, but maybe it doesn't have as much of an impact. So we do try to balance those types of proposals. Also having good consultants, and again, the creatives improves chances of success, business expertise, strong letters of support, definitely, and then a clear understanding of entry and sustainability in the market. So you definitely want to show that you've thought about your market and that you know that one exists for your product. So kind of continuing on that conversation, advice for phase 1 is to provide a vision of where you want to be at the end of phase 2. So really, even though your phase 1 is more focused on the science and proof of concept, you really need to be thinking ahead to the phase 2 and that commercial side of things, even in your phase 1 application. You should focus your research on critical enabling factors. So what's shown to prove success in whatever you're doing, selling the importance of your project, as well as how it aligns with USDA priorities is important. You want to provide a detailed experimental plan, because remember, these reviewers are going to be scientists and colleagues in that field, so they will understand the scientific and technical aspects of your work. So you do want to be specific there. And then providing insight into the commercial potential, as we've talked about. And again, showing connectivity with the communities by including those letters of support. And then this is a slide I just threw in. It's kind of a frequently asked questions / advice for the applying side of things that I think is useful, because it's a lot of the, like I said, a lot of the questions I receive. So first, the piece of advice is to get your registrations completed early. SAM.gov needs to be done first in order to get your grants.gov account set up properly. And then also registering in SBIR.gov for that small business concern or SBC number. The SAM.gov is really the limiting step here, because that could take over a month. So you really want to make sure that that gets done and started early. Also, as I mentioned earlier, was to contact a topic area leader for a consult. So those 10 topic areas each has their own topic area leader that is a subject matter expert. And these are the people I really refer applicants to talk to about the actual work, because they will understand it on a scientific level that I can't understand. So setting up a time to talk with them by emailing them a short synopsis of your proposed work and ask them if they have time to meet would be a really good step to do early on in the application process. You don't want to wait till a week or two before the deadline to do that. You want to follow all the application guidelines in the RFA. That's including format, page limits, required documents. Really just read the RFA. I had a conversation with an applicant a week or two ago and had asked them if they had a chance to look at the RFA, and they said, yeah, but kind of just skimmed it. It's not very exciting reading. And I laughed, because it's true. It's not exciting reading, but it's very important. So it's one of those things I'd suggest printing off and highlighting all the requirements to make sure you don't miss anything. You'd really hate to spend months of time and resources, preparing an application only for it to not even pass administrative review just because you put it in the wrong format. And that happens quite frequently. So just please read the RFA. And following on to that, ensure the application responds to the review criteria. So basically our panelists are going to be looking at the RFA just like you do when they were, when they're going to review these proposals, they're saying these are the things that are supposed to be here, are they? So you kind of want to look at that as well when you're preparing your application to see, do I touch on all these things that are supposed to be here? Finally, apply early. So grants.gov is a system that we use, but unfortunately we have no control over it. So if you try to apply a few hours before the deadline and have issues, technical problems with grants.gov, unfortunately, NIFA will not be able to help you at all because we can't access their systems. So I suggest applying at least several days before the deadline. Don't wait until hours before or even the day before, because if you have issues and you don't get the application in on time, generally we will not accept that late application. Something I will point out is that you always have the option of submitting your application, and then say you have to make changes to it. You can always resubmit that application. And how we handle that on our end is that when those two of the same applications come into us for review, we're only going to accept one, and we're going to accept the later submission as long as it comes in before the deadline. And we're automatically going to decline that first submission because we're going to see that it's a duplicate submission of the same proposal. So that's something to note. by any chance you happen to submit twice and you want that first application reviewed, just reach out to us and let us know. But at least this way you can apply a week before and know you at least have an application in instead of waiting until the last minute and being late. Because even if it's 1 minute late, it won't get reviewed. So I just wanted to briefly touch on a few SBIR success stories. I'm not going to spend much time on these, but just to give you an idea of some of the projects we funded. The first one here is Alteros Energies. And this is a really cool buoyant airborne turbine, BAT. And basically it's a wind turbine that they release at higher altitudes to capture more wind power and use it to generate economic power and electric power for rural communities and remote locations. And this company actually had an investment of $7 million from SoftBank for future deployment of the technology in Japan. Another one here is Prairie Aquatech, and they developed a fish feed using microbial enhancement of conversion of soybean meal. So converting soybean meal into a fish feed, and they called this MePro, and they were the recipient of the 2019 Aquafeed Innovation Award in Germany. And they just recently commissioned a 30,000 square foot facility to scale up production. So they're doing quite well. And finally, this is a little bit older one, but Embrex was an awardee, and they developed a vaccine that enhanced efficiency for bird performance, and they were actually purchased by Pfizer. So another one of our success stories here. And that's basically all I have. As I mentioned, you can find most of the information on our website. We have the solicitations here, so make sure you're looking at the most recent solicitation on our website. Something I did need to mention earlier is we moved towards a 2-year RFA last year in order to help our applicants better prepare. And this way we would post the deadline for the next year so that you kind of had an advance notice of what was coming. One thing to note with that is that even though it's a 2-year RFA, we do repost the RFA just for updates. So we did recently post that August RFA. So make sure you're looking at that one and not just the one that was posted last October. You can find other resources on our website. Also, if you need to reach us, our email is pretty easy. It's sbir@usda.gov. As a reminder, I am the SBIR program specialist, and then we also have a new program coordinator, Melinda Kaufman. So both of us monitor this SBIR box. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach us there. And I will gladly take any questions. So thank you.
Kelly, thank you very much indeed. And it looks like there are questions piling up, which is great news. I just wanted to emphasize that a topic that is near and dear to my heart and Misty's is that with every client and every EPIC SBDC client with whom we work, or faculty who are submitting a proposal, any agency, you had mentioned the topic area consult. Really, really important. People may push back to us and say, well, gee, it's not required. We say, yeah, but it's a really good idea. Kelly, is there a template or anything or any guidelines on how to structure maybe a letter, a single-page document or something that we should send to you to find a topic area consultation opportunity?
So we don't have a template or anything. Generally, I just advise at least send a paragraph or so in the email to the national program leader that runs that topic area to give an overview of what they're working on. And then just simply saying, you know, are you available for a phone call? And just starting that dialogue. I think that's really all that's needed. It doesn't have to be anything fancy or anything like that. I just say start that early. You know, right now is our very, very busy season with our October 22 deadline coming up. So these NPLs are getting tons of inquiries every single day. So you don't want to be held up on preparing your application, waiting for their response, because they've got a lot of people to respond to. So the earlier you can start that conversation with the program leader, the better, to give them time to get their feedback.
Sure. Kelly, Marcus Chi had asked, who are the USDA vendors? Marcus, I am guessing that you're responding to Kelly's conversation about the commercialization support from LARDA, I think. I'm not sure. Is it LARDA for phase 1? I don't know whether you said LARDA was available for phase 2 or not. You recall from the prior agency session with DOT that they were using Foresight. Are you exclusively LARDA?
Yep, so LARDA was
based in LA? Yeah.
for phase 1. Yes, and they do offer phase 2 assistance. That is up to the company to decide who they want to use though, so they can make that decision.
But the phase 2, that's not supported by the grant, or is it?
They can request it. So they can request an additional $50,000, but they have to put in their application who their vendor is going to be, the letter or statement of work from the vendor and that sort of thing. So they can choose to use LARDA or whoever they want. There just won't be a USDA vendor for phase 2.
Ah, I see. Okay. You had mentioned critical enabling factors, as if I recall correctly, for us to pay very close attention to hopefully enhance our chances for success. Could you explain to us what you mean by what is a critical enabling factor?
I just mean more so for the work that is being done. If they have any sort of preliminary research or factors that is going to make their technology or innovation a success or bring it to market, what those are, and really just building your case for this is why I think this is going to work, sort of. I guess that's, yeah, kind of what I was getting at.
Okay. And before I flip over to Milan, I wanted to make certain, do you offer contracts, grants, or both?
Just grants.
Just grants, okay. And Milan, you had asked, is robotic development available for forest and tree inspection and management? I'm wondering, maybe another way to phrase that Kelly, is does NIFA have an interest in, I guess, the testing and development of for robotics, that is to say, for forest and tree inspection, management,
Yes,
and so forth? Yeah.
there definitely is an interest in robotics. Where that would fall would depend, I guess, on the focus of the work. But we do have robotics programs, I mean, in SBIR as well as outside of SBIR. We have grant programs that work with the National Robotics Institute, for example, as one of our programs. So there is definitely an interest. The national program leader for 8.13, Dr. Stephen Thompson, I often call him our robotics guy. He's the one who manages a lot of the robotics programs, and he'd probably be the first person I would direct you to. His topic area is plant production and protection in the engineering department, engineering side of things. Often that one isn't as much focused on forests, but I'm not saying it can't be. He would just be the person to probably start that conversation with.
Got it. And Marcus has another question. Can we apply for 2 separate applications on 2 separate topics? Is that allowable?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you can submit as many applications as you want. Phase 1 is limited to 2 awards for your company. So if you submitted 3 applications and 3 got selected for funding, we'd ask you to select which 2 you wanted to get funded.
Okay, terrific. I think I lost a question from Kieran somewhere. Kieran, could I impose on you? Your question seemed to disappear. So if you don't mind re-entering your question, I'd appreciate it. So we'll flip over to Milan while Kieran, you're doing that. Excuse me. These questions are jumping all over the map, so I have to be really agile here. So Milan, you were asking farm waste management and on-site energy production. This follows the question that you had asked in the prior session as well for low carbon dioxide, fuel agnostic, zero emissions. So this is a mouthful. So I'll, with your permission, Kelly, I'll just read it and see if we can translate into something that you can address. Farm waste management, on-site energy production, high efficiency, low carbon dioxide, fuel agnostics, zero emissions engine technology, dealing with farm forest waste, produces clean exhaust and so forth, air that we can breathe. Technology readiness level 4. So having said all that, is that an area that, Kelly, you folks might possibly be open to considering for funding?
It certainly sounds like it. We do have the biofuels and bio-based products topic area, and I'm trying to understand, this is why I refer to the national program leaders, because they at least have the science background to understand questions. Sounds like it's just figuring out which topic area would fall under, but that's what came to mind first, would be the biofuels and bio-based products. Because if you're using farm waste, to create fuel, that would be definitely fall under biofuel.
Okay.
But yeah, you can definitely take a look at the RFA and read the research priority areas under each of the topic areas, and that might help as well.
Terrific. And Kieran, thanks a lot for retexting your question here. So here we go. Regenerative agriculture. It's a mouthful for me. Grazing and carbon sequestering. Those topics, anything of interest to you folks? Kelly, would that be something as a solicitation topic? And Kieran, by the way, he's working on geospatial framework for what he is terming as carbon-rich ecosystems. For 3D and 4D surveillance monitoring and so forth. It's a modeling and management tool that Kieran's been working on for quite some time. So bottom line, regenerative agriculture, grazing, and carbon sequestering. Is that an area that perhaps NIFA might pay attention to? And I realize we're throwing clauses and phrases and stuff at you, so you know I know you can't say absolutely without a doubt. Well, we're ready to write a check right now, but you know, to the extent that what I've shared with you, that might be something that you could possibly, in other words, a topic area that you would consider.
Sure, and it does sound like it could possibly fall under at least one of our topic areas. So I think that would definitely be something we would consider. Again, sometimes it helps to know where you're going with it, what's your end goal, and having that conversation with the topic area leader is what we would recommend. Because sometimes, like I said, they could fall under more than one, and depending on where you're trying to go with this down the road, really depends on where you should be applying to. So I definitely take a look again at those research priorities and try to align your goals, because you know them the best, with our research priority areas. Underneath, because I mean, we have the conservation of natural resources is one, but you know, again, you could have something that falls under conservation of natural resources, but also under small and mid-sized farms, for instance. So it really depends on where you're trying to go with it.
Sure. And Milan asked a question, and it follows on the same one that you may have heard Kelly to Melissa in our prior session, and that is. Can we suggest topics to you, even though it's not included at this particular moment in time in your solicitations? Can we reach out and say, hey, what do you think would this be something that we could maybe talk about, and who knows, maybe end up being a solicitation sometime in the future? Is that,
sure? Yeah, it doesn't
possible?
hurt it doesn't hurt to propose anything. You can always send an email to the SBIR box, and we'll keep a running tab on those. And then during our RFA development process, we can certainly take a look at those with the program leaders and look at what's suggested and get their input as well. So I just would suggest sending an email to the SBIR box.
Sure, absolutely. I think there's another question, otherwise I've got a bazillion of them. Okay, that's the same one. Thanks, Milan. Kelly, you had mentioned that you don't do direct to phase 2. Does that mean also you don't do fast track?
Correct, we do
Okay.
not.
All right. And another area that Misty and I hammer away at ad nauseum, letters of support. Can't underscore enough how critical and important those are. Are there any limits? I think one speaker had mentioned an exceptionally high number of letters of support. In other words, back your dump truck up and drop it on our driveway, and we'll take them on. Others may say, how about limiting it to 3 or 5 or something like that? We know that you love them. Are there any limits to letters of support before you get absolutely inundated and start begging for mercy?
I don't think we put any limits in the RFA that I recall offhand. I'd have to confirm, but I don't think there's any limit. I'd say just I mean, you know, certainly they are very useful. As long as they're strong letters of support, I'd say if you just have like hundreds of them and they're not really strong or not really useful, I wouldn't put them in there, because you might just make the reviewers mad that they have to look through that many. But
sure.
As long as they're useful and strong letters of support, I'd say include them.
Great.
Thing about that, I get asked a lot, the letters of support should be addressed to the company, not to NIFA or USDA, because the letter of support really should be going towards the company.
Sure, absolutely. Right. Do you have a template or anything that you recommend? Or, I mean, we do, Misty and I do, but I'm just wondering if perhaps you might have one that you prefer.
No, we do not.
Okay. Do you have any phase 0? Do you have a phase 0 program?
We do not.
Applicant assistant? Okay.
Yeah.
So something that Misty and I work on as well, we get accused a lot of being helicopter advisors, which means we hover over them and go over every word, every clause, every phrase until we're all feeling hopefully warm and fuzzy about how the proposal is going to come into you.
Yeah.
Can you share any recommendations, Kelly, on when you see a good proposal, what's included in it that you really like to see and you expect, almost require? And conversely, are there some mistakes that some of us may make that you're gonna maybe that you can tell us that don't make those mistakes, don't do that, it hurts your chances?
So I don't personally read all of the proposals. I do all the processing behind the scenes, but I can tell you from some of the conversations I have heard, I guess, just a basic, well-written proposal. So like you said, you go over a lot of the sentences, make sure everything's clear, but it should flow pretty nicely. Meaning your tables match up to where they say they are and stuff like that. You want to make sure it's clean for the most part, and that you address, as I mentioned earlier, all of the stuff in the RFA. So the RFA really does talk about the narrative. This is what we want to see. So, if you kind of just follow that, I think you probably do pretty well. But again, just making it very clear, including any confidential or proprietary information and marking it as necessary, any proprietary data. I guess, again, the biggest things that we don't want to see are just very hard to follow. A lot of these panelists could be reviewing 10 applications in phase one for our program. And if you make it really hard for them to read or to follow, and you're referencing a table that doesn't exist, it makes them probably a little cranky. So just, I would say just make sure it's clean and easy to follow would be the biggest recommendation.
Yeah, Kelly, you bring up a very important point. You had just mentioned tables. How important are tables and charts to very tired reviewers who are on their 9th or 10th proposal?
I think it could be a very useful thing, especially if you have preliminary data or things that you're trying to show. Again, just like any scientific person would, they should be easy to read, easy to know what the point is. They should be making a point, and they should be referenced properly in the text. I would say most proposals have tables, charts, or pictures even. If you're have an elaborate setup in a lab and are trying to explain it, sometimes a picture speaks 1,000 words. So definitely feel free to include that stuff. We do realize that this is included in your page limit, so the more that you have, the less it takes away from your text. So you do have to find that balance where you can't have a ton of stuff and then not enough room for the text. But I would say definitely include them if you can, make a point with them that supports your narrative.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Kelly. There are two other areas that Misty and I can sometimes get accused of being ogres about it, but it's so important to us. And one is the research design and methods, the study approach. And the second one, of course, is the commercialization plan along with that. Is there anything in particular that maybe you can advise us on relative to the study approach that we present to you, the project description, the research design methods, and so forth, that you really look for in order to determine whether or not this is a proposal worth funding?
So that would be a good question for our program leaders, because they are academics and PhDs in the field. They know better than I do about research methodology. And I recently had a question about somebody asking about research methodology. And I'll be honest, I had no idea what they were asking. So I forwarded to my national program leader and said, can you please answer this? Because it was asking about study design. So I would say if you have questions about that, definitely that's part of that conversation to have with the national program leader to see what they would recommend. A lot, we do have a lot of new program leaders, but they, most of them are experienced in the review process and have, at least sat in on panels or served as reviewers. So they do have some context of what's been funded in the past or what discussions have happened in the past. So they would have a little bit more insight to give than I could.
Got it. And with regard to the commercialization plan, Kelly, I think you may have already answered this, but so forgive me if I'm asking the same question over again. Phase 1 and phase 2 commercialization plans, what do you look for in phase 1? What do you look for in phase 2?
So phase
if we get there.
Gotcha. Yeah, phase 1 does not have a formal requirement for a commercialization plan, where phase does too. So phase 2 has a special 10, I think it's 10 pages with what they want to see, and that's all listed in the RFA. And again, we have additional reviewers who focus solely on that commercialization plan for phase 2. For phase 1, you don't have to you don't have to have that separate commercialization plan, but you should still show that you put thought into this and that you're thinking ahead to that phase 2. So you've identified a market, you've shown that this market exists, and you see a path forward to commercialization. And that's what we really want to see. You obviously aren't there yet, we know that, but you have to at least be putting thought into it.
Great.
So there's a few more questions in the chat.
Yeah.
One was, is it appropriate to have links in your proposal that lead to a video online that may demonstrate something for your proposal?
I would not recommend it. I don't think I've ever seen that done, but really everything should be in that proposal in and of itself. Because if that link doesn't work, or, I don't know if they will come through in our system accurately. I'm not sure how that would work. So I would not count on using links.
Yep. Yeah, we typically do not recommend that, frankly. I don't think too many agencies or reviewers want to have to do the extra work of linking onto something. And the answer is yes, anonymous. We have all the slides and you have access to them, I believe, Misty.
Yes, we're going to make the slides and the presentations available on our website. So I'll be sending out, once they are available, I'll send an email out to the attendees.
And Marcus, you had asked whether or not you can get a letter of support from me or Misty. The answer is that really, really depends. We normally recommend that you get letters of support from a prospective investor, a corporate partner, a customer. Those are the ones, and Kelly, this would be a great one for you to chime in, because this is something that Misty and I and perhaps a few other mentors get asked as well, is can you write me a letter of support? We are advisors, but we highly recommend to everybody that you have your quality letters of support that, Kelly, I think that you had mentioned from a target customer, prospective investor, a corporate partner, and so forth. Those are the ones, Kelly, I believe that would be much more important and of interest to you and your reviewers than, with all highest respect to people like yours truly here and so forth. A letter from me, is that fair to say?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Okay. So, Milan, for innovation, had asked for innovation companies with a business-to-business licensing model. How can they engage since there is no direct path to commercialization? Okay, that's a confusing one. Maybe we can, maybe we can tackle that one, Milan, offline. That's kind of a semi-loaded question. I'm not certain, Kelly, if that's really
That's
for you or not.
Beyond me, unfortunately.
Yeah. Milan, why don't you reach out to Misty and me here, and we'll do a deeper dive into that topic. There are several business models, as you know, and so we need to do a deeper dive into your initiative before we can help you on something like that. Okay. Misty, I'm kind of running out of gas here. I've exhausted all of my questions. Folks, is there any, this is a golden opportunity to.
There's one more question.
Yeah. Oh, terrific.
From Brian.
We recognize this guy. Hey, Brian, how are you? Brian, you're welcome to tap in and speak this question yourself, or comment if you wish. It's a good opportunity to introduce you anyway. So, hop in if you can, if Hannah can open it up for you. Or not, you're still muted. Hannah, can you open up Brian for us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Now we're cooking. Yeah. Okay, hey Brian.
Hey, so the question is, you guys were talking about letters of support. So from the agency perspective, so I work at the University Tech Transfer Office. We get frequent inquiries from the companies to say, hey, can you write a letter of support? that says that if I get, if the company gets the SBIR funding, that, we would grant an option or a license to the IP. How much weight does that letter of support carry with the reviewers and with USDA in particular? And, should the letter of support really be, hey, we've granted them a license or an option, and so they have the rights, versus we will grant them in the future?
That's a good question. I'm not too familiar with the letters of support and where they've come from, because I don't review the application, so I don't really get to see, that. I would think that it would be a good thing to include if it exists. How much weight it carries would just kind of be, just like all the other components, it's one factor of many when you're reviewing the application. If you have a poorly written application but great letters of support, you're probably still not going to get funded, versus having strong letters of support and a strong application. So I think it's just one piece of the component, one piece of the puzzle. I can't really speak to how much weight it would hold, because things are, looking at, you do look at everything as a whole, so to speak, at the applications. I would have to find out how they would recommend writing that. Some of our program leaders would probably know better than I do, because I'm sure they've seen them as they review the applications.
Yeah, because I know from just, I always thought a letter of support that said we will grant you an option or a license was, in my opinion, fairly useless.
Yeah.
And so, because we have the companies that are reluctant to enter into an option agreement or a license agreement because it costs them money. And so they want to wait, but they want us to write these letters that we will grant them, but not commit to actually, actually licensing or optioning. But thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian, very much indeed. And I wanted to follow up on the response that I had given also relative to the merits of letters of support from us. We do write letters. Most of the program directors know who we are, but we do write letters indicating that we will indeed, EPIC, will support your commercialization efforts. As we do with high power, top tier advisors and so forth. That being said, we still highly recommend that your letters of support should come from target customers, investors, corporate partners. So Paul, you had indicated that you have letters dating way back to the olden days, 2017 and 2018. Would they still hold value? Kelly, what's your response to those that may be a couple of years old?
Again, I haven't seen it done, or haven't heard that come up in the panels that I've sat in on. I would think that may raise a bit of a red flag with panelists, why it's outdated. You can certainly include them, but if you had updated ones, I think it would look better, or at least would hold better in panel. Would be just my thoughts off the top of my head.
Our experience, Kelly and everybody, is that the reviewers would like you to update those letters, frankly. They should be dated 2020, for example. At least that's what we've learned from many of the reviewers and program directors and so forth.
Yeah.
And anonymous attendee, I wonder if you're the same person. Is it appropriate to help write letters of support for those you are asking letters of support from? That actually turns out to be a pretty good idea. What often happens with many of you who are applying, it's okay to draft a letter and then offer them an opportunity to carefully read it and edit it and put it on their letterhead. So it's a good way to help save them time, because often they will ask you, well, gee, what do I write in a letter of support? So it's okay to help them as long as you ask them expressly to edit it liberally, put it on their letterhead and sign off on it. That way it still can come across, or it still is, as a matter of fact, a legitimate letter from them. And Kevin, you had asked what is considered a dated letter. A dated letter is a letter that has a date on it, I guess. I don't want to sound superficial to you, but, or I believe a dated letter might be something, Kelly, that is what, 2019, 2018, 2017 or something? What's your experience in terms of, for example, would a letter dated 2019, would that be, that might be possibly acceptable, not entirely certain. I recommend make them recent. In other words, the date of the proposal, make the letters dated the same time window.
Yeah. You don't want to leave it up to
Yeah,
the question of the review or to the panelists. If they're looking at a letter from 2017, they might say, well, is this still accurate? Do they still support them? So you start leaving questions up to the panelists, their minds start going. So I would just recommend don't leave any questions and get a more recent updated letter for that grant, for that cycle.
terrific. Well, Kelly and everybody, we've done it again. We've taken up pretty close to a whole hour. And Kelly, we are very, very honored and grateful to have you join us. And we know that you have a few one-on-ones that you have been so gracious to meet with. And so to that end, got a little bit under 10 minutes, I guess, for you to make that switch, Kelly, over to your appointments and so forth. And for the rest of us, we'll take about a 10-minute break. Actually, I'll hand the baton over to you, Misty, as our quarterback here, and tell us what our next steps
that's
are.
right. We'll take a short break, and we'll be back at 11 with our next panel. So
Terrific. Kelly, thank you so much.